My brother always lowered his voice when he introduced me in public as if my existence embarrassed him, and when his elite in-laws asked about his family, he showed them photos of our parents, but never me. I stood behind him at events, wearing simple clothes, watching rich people laugh at jokes I did not understand until one night at a luxury charity gala, everything changed. A woman gasped when she saw my face. The room went silent, and the same people who ignored me suddenly stood up straight because they finally realized who this USA girl really was. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I grew up in a quiet American town where people measured success by peace, not by power. I never cared about luxury brands or elite circles. I cared about books, about long walks, and about staying invisible because invisible people do not get hurt. My brother Daniel was different from the day he learned how to speak. He wanted more money, more recognition, more approval, and when he married into one of the most elite families in the country, he believed he had finally escaped the life he was ashamed of. Daniel's wife Sophia came from a world I had only seen in movies: private schools, summer homes, country clubs, and last names that opened doors without knocking. When Daniel invited me to visit after his wedding, his voice changed. It was polite, but distant, like he was talking to a stranger. He told me to dress simply, to not speak too much, to let him handle conversations. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but when I arrived at their mansion and saw how he avoided standing next to me, I realized he meant every word. At dinner, his in-laws asked about his family. Daniel talked proudly about our parents, about their sacrifices, about how hard life was growing up, but when his mother-in-law asked if he had siblings, he hesitated, then casually said yes, a sister who prefers a quiet life. He did not say my name. I sat right there, smiling, politely holding my glass, while they looked past me like I was part of the furniture. That night I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I became something my own brother wanted to hide. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, helping him study, the days I worked 2 jobs so he could move to a better city, the dreams I quietly buried so he could chase his, but now I was the embarrassment. Over the next weeks, I saw it happen again and again at brunch events, charity lunches, and family gatherings. Daniel introduced me as Evelyn, his sister from back home, his tone always apologetic, his eyes always nervous. His in-laws barely acknowledged me there. Conversations floated above my head about investments and yachts and legacy, and I listened in silence. What none of them knew was that I had chosen this silence. I had walked away from a world louder than theirs, a world where my last name carried weight, a world where my face had once been on magazine covers, not for beauty, but for influence. I had changed my life, changed my name, changed my city. After something happened that nearly destroyed me, I promised myself I would never step into that spotlight again. But secrets have a way of waiting. One afternoon, Sophia invited me to join them at a charity gala hosted by one of the most powerful families in the state. Daniel looked uncomfortable when she suggested it. He pulled me aside and whispered that it would be better if I stayed home, that people there were different, that I might feel out of place. I smiled and said I would go anyway. That night, I wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no makeup, just my hair neatly tied back. As we entered the ballroom, crystal lights reflected off marble floors, and conversations paused for a moment as people turned to look not at me, but at the familiar shape of my face. I felt it before I saw it, the shift, the silence, the recognition. A woman near the entrance froze mid-step, her eyes wide, her hand trembling. She whispered a name under her breath, not Evelyn, not Carter, but the name I had buried years ago. And suddenly, the room remembered me. The woman who recognized me stepped forward slowly, as if afraid I might disappear if she blinked. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room, and when she spoke my buried name, every conversation stopped. I felt Daniel stiffen beside me, his hand tightened around his glass. Sophia turned to him, confused, asking what was happening, but he could not answer because his face had gone pale. People began to turn their heads, whispers spreading like wildfire through silk gowns and tailored suits. The woman reached me and smiled with a mix of respect and disbelief. She said she never thought she would see me again, not here, not like this. Others moved closer, drawn by curiosity, by memory, by power. Daniel finally found his voice and laughed awkwardly, saying there must be a mistake, that she had the wrong person. He said I was just his sister, who lived a quiet life, who avoided attention. The woman looked at him with calm authority and said, there are faces you do not forget, especially when they once changed the direction of this country. Silence fell heavy and uncomfortable. Sophia stared at me, her eyes searching my face, as if trying to match it with stories she had heard, but never connected. I met her gaze calmly, the same way I had learned to face boardrooms filled with people who underestimated me. More guests joined the circle. A man with silver hair and a powerful posture nodded slowly, as if confirming a memory. He addressed me with a title I had not heard in years and thanked me for a decision I made long ago that saved his company from collapse. My heart beat faster, not from fear but from the weight of the past returning. Daniel stepped back, as if the floor beneath him had shifted. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger, not the sister he told to stay quiet, not the embarrassment he hid behind polite smiles. He whispered my name in disbelief and asked me why I never told him. I told him softly that he never asked. The night unfolded differently after that. Chairs were pulled closer, glasses refilled, conversations redirected toward me. People wanted to know where I had been, why I left, why I disappeared. I answered, carefully choosing words that revealed strength, but not wounds. Sophia listened silently, her expression changing from confusion to shock to something close to admiration. I explained that years ago I had stood at the top of a powerful industry, making decisions that affected thousands of lives. When a scandal threatened to consume everything, I chose to walk away rather than let innocent people fall with me. I stepped into anonymity, rebuilt myself far from cameras and applause. I found peace there. The elite guests listened with respect, not pity. They spoke to me as an equal, as someone whose silence was a choice, not a failure. Daniel watched every interaction, realizing that while he chased approval, I had walked away from it. Later that evening, his mother-in-law approached me with careful grace. She apologized for not recognizing me sooner and thanked me for honoring their event with my presence. The same woman who barely acknowledged me weeks ago now treated me like an honored guest. As we left the gala, Daniel finally broke down. He admitted he was afraid that standing next to me would make him look small, afraid that my past would overshadow the image he tried to build. I told him quietly that love is not about comparison and family is not something you hide when it becomes inconvenient. That night marked the beginning of something new, not just for him but for all of them. And the story was far from over. The days after the gala felt unreal, as if a hidden door had opened and light poured into places that were never meant to be seen. Messages arrived from numbers I did not recognize, invitations to lunches, private meetings, and conferences. Daniel watched it all. Quietly, his pride bruised, his confidence shaken. He tried to act normal, but every glance he gave me carried questions he was too afraid to ask. Sophia changed as well. She no longer spoke over me or redirected conversations. She listened. She observed. One morning, she asked me directly why I chose silence over power. I told her that power without peace is a beautiful prison, and she nodded slowly, as if something inside her finally made sense. But not everyone welcomed my return to relevance. One of Daniel's brothers-in-law, Victor, had built his identity on influence, control, and being the smartest man in every room. My presence disrupted that balance. At a private dinner, he challenged my decisions, questioned my past, implied that walking away was an admission of guilt. The table went quiet, all eyes on me, waiting to see if I would break. I smiled calmly and said, walking away is easy when you have nothing left to lose. It is difficult when you choose to leave everything behind. He said nothing after that. Old connections resurfaced, reminding me why I left. A former partner reached out, offering a position that would put me back in the spotlight. I declined politely. The world I escaped was seductive, but dangerous, and I had promised myself I would never let ambition consume my humanity again. Daniel finally confronted me late one night. He admitted that growing up he always lived in my shadow. Teachers praised me, mentors noticed me, doors opened effortlessly for me. While he struggled, he thought marrying into an elite family would finally make him important enough to matter. I listened without interrupting because for the first time he was being honest. I told him that worth is not inherited or married into, it is built when no one is watching. He cried quietly, not out of weakness, but release. Years of insecurity poured out, and for the first time in a long time we spoke as equals, not as competitors. The family dynamic shifted. Invitations now included my name. First conversations paused. When I entered rooms, decisions were delayed until I gave my opinion, but I noticed how easily respect replaced warmth, how admiration came with distance. I began to question whether recognition was worth the cost. The answer came when an unexpected crisis hit the family. A business deal Sophia's father had championed began to collapse, threatening their reputation, and fortune panic spread. Meetings turned hostile and blame circulated like poison. They turned to Daniel first, then to Victor, and finally their eyes landed on me. They asked for my help. I stood there feeling the weight of choice again: step back into the fire or remain silent and watch everything burn. The room waited, holding its breath. And I realized this moment was never about proving myself. It was about deciding who I still wanted to be. I asked for time not because I needed it, but because they did. I wanted them to feel the uncertainty the same way I once felt invisible. They agreed reluctantly, and for the first time the powerful family waited on the quiet girl they once ignored. That night, I walked alone through the city lights, thinking about the version of myself I buried, the woman who spoke confidently in rooms filled with ambition, the woman who signed papers that moved markets, the woman who learned that brilliance does not protect you from betrayal. I remembered why I left and the faces of those who smiled while sharpening knives behind my back. In the morning I returned with one condition: transparency, no hidden agendas, no sacrifices made in silence. They accepted without negotiation, because desperation removes pride faster than failure. I stepped into the chaos with calm precision. I identified the flaw in the deal within minutes, not because I was smarter, but because I listened where others talked. I restructured negotiations, rebuilt trust, and redirected blame away from innocent employees. Within days, the crisis slowed. Within weeks, the damage was controlled. The family watched in awe, not just at the outcome, but at how I treated everyone involved. I spoke to assistants with respect. I credited teams instead of claiming victories. I corrected mistakes without humiliation. It was leadership without arrogance, and it unsettled them. Victor finally broke. He accused me of enjoying the power of being needed again. He said I had planned this moment all along. I looked at him and said, power is loud when it is insecure. True influence is quiet. He never challenged me again. Daniel stood beside me during every meeting, not as the husband of an elite daughter, but as a man learning confidence from example. When reporters tried to reach me, I declined interviews. I redirected attention to the company and stepped back once stability returned. The family threw a private dinner to thank me. Speeches were made, glasses raised, apologies offered. My brother's mother-in-law stood and admitted publicly that she misjudged me, that her idea of value was too narrow, that silence is not absence of strength. I accepted her words with grace, not triumph, because I did not need them anymore. Later, Daniel asked if I would stay longer, if I would become part of their world again. I told him I never left the world, I simply chose a different place within it. As I packed my bags, I realized something powerful. I was never embarrassing. I was simply inconvenient to a story built on comparison. And now they finally knew the truth. The morning I left the mansion, the house felt different, quieter, softer, like it finally understood what it had almost lost. Daniel walked me to the door carrying my bag, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He hugged me longer than usual and whispered that he was proud of me, not for what I did, but for who I was. I smiled, because that was all I ever wanted. Sophia thanked me privately. She said watching me changed how she measured success. She promised to raise her future children with humility, not entitlement. I believed her, because growth looks like listening, not defending. As my car pulled away, I did not look back. I felt no urge to be remembered there. I had already left something more valuable than my name. I left perspective. Months later, I heard that Daniel stopped chasing approval and started building confidence. The family became quieter, less obsessed with appearances, more focused on impact. They never spoke my buried name in public again, not because they were ashamed, but because they finally understood respect. I returned to my small, peaceful life where mornings were slow and my phone stayed silent. I mentored young women anonymously, helped causes that never asked for credit, and slept without fear of headlines. One evening, a letter arrived from a young girl who said she felt invisible in her own family. I wrote back telling her that invisibility is sometimes protection until the world is ready for your light. My brother once thought I was embarrassing because I did not shine the way he expected. But when his elite in-laws recognized me, they did not see luxury. They saw legacy. And I walked away smiling.